I've been around kayak fishing for almost 15 years and I've seen a little bit of everything. I've been through the paddle to pedal movement, the pedal to motor movement, the motor to two motor movement, and now after this latest iCast it looks like maybe a couple of motors to a jet motor movement. After this latest iCast with some of the new innovations and the rigging options people are choosing and the sheer cost, it got me thinking about the title of this video, which is Have Fishing Kayaks and Fishing Kayak Designs Jump the Shark? For those not familiar with that term, Jump the Shark relates back to some television shows in the 70s and 80s, specifically Happy Days. When the ratings started to fall, they started to do wilder and wilder things to try to increase ratings when shows were struggling. And one of those things on a show called Happy Days was literally jump a shark. So whenever you see things start to get a little bit too crazy, it makes you think, are we struggling to innovate? So we're just getting wild and throwing everything at this particular product or this particular sport. So that's what we're going to talk about right here. So I'm going to give you two reasons why I think this may be the case, or at least close to being the case, and then a couple of probably unintended consequences or effects that this could have now or down the road. So first we're going to talk about the cost of these new fishing kayaks. Post iCast and during iCast, I saw a lot of videos bragging about almost these $25,000, $30,000 kayaks, many of them at least in the $10,000 to $15,000 range. And that's wild to me. I mean, when I was early in this sport, if you had a basic kayak, a paddle kayak, or even a kayak with pedals, and you put a 9-inch or 10-inch graph on it, you'd get the cliche joke, why don't you just buy a boat? That thing's crazy. Why do you need all that on a kayak? And that was when your kayak was a couple $1,000s all in, maybe $3 at the most, even with the graph. And now with these $25,000 rigs, the just buy a boat crowd might have a point. I got on Facebook Marketplace and looked up used bass boats and even a couple new bass boats, and it's real easy to find a decent 17, 18 foot aluminum bass boat with a 115 outboard, fish finders installed already, trolling motor, for $25,000 or less. So the sheer cost has really gotten out of control, not just of the boats themselves, but at least the perceived amount of rigging you need to do to have a competitive kayak, especially if you're tournament fishing. And it really applies to the competitive side of things. But just in general, the cost of the kayak, the cost of the rigging of the kayak has really, really gotten out of control. And in many ways, in my opinion, gone a little bit too far. The just buy a boat gang might have been right. I mean, they're even launching these things like a boat. The second reason I think things have gotten a little out of control on the rigging and design side is I don't feel like there's been a thought or a real thought to safety. I've said this on other videos, but many folks are not kayak anglers. They're just anglers that use a kayak, and they're not really familiar with how to be safe and navigate a kayak in rough waters, how to get back in if it flips. And I don't know, with some of these new kayaks, with the amount of electronics, some with 2 to 3 graph screens on them, large, 10, 12 inches, plus multiple lithium batteries, metal motor brackets, power poles, all the tackle that you carry. How safe is that? To put safety aside to worry about who can rig out their boat in the old Pimp My Ride style like they used to have on MTV with cars of kayaks seems a little bit dangerous. It seems like the only reason you may be doing that is to try to get eyes on your product, which I get that, that's marketing, but at some point we have to think, is this safe? When you're talking about tournaments, are tournament directors going to have to start checking your vessel for safety to make sure it's not over-rigged, that it can handle the weight that's on it? I don't know. But the move towards fancy rig with not much of a consideration for safety leads me to believe that we've gotten a little wild with the designs and rigging of these boats. Now here's a few of the unintended consequences that I think may come from this runaway price structure and this runaway of rigging. And it's coming from a lot of influencers that people look to when they're starting to get into the sport. So here's 3 potential effects that it could have on the sport overall. Number 1, it could be a huge barrier of entry for new folks coming into the sport. I know we had a big boom during COVID, and even before that, kayak fishing was booming, kayak bass fishing in particular. But back when I got into the sport, you could pick up a magazine, YouTube was young, but you could get on YouTube and you'd find a kayak that a common person could afford. Anybody could go out, spend $1,200, get a kayak and a paddle and a PFD and be on the water. But now, if you hear about kayak fishing and think, well, I'd like to get into that, and you jump on TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, and look up fishing kayaks, you're gonna see a at minimum, probably $2,500 to $5,000 boat baseline, you're gonna see it have multiple motors on it, multiple screens, lithium batteries, a trailer, even though they have a truck that could, even though the person probably has a truck they could have truck bed carried the kayak with, or thrown the kayak in the truck bed. They're gonna have a trailer, launch it like a boat. And to look at that as someone that's coming off the street trying to get into the sport, you're like, no thanks. I'll just buy a pond prowler or a flat bottom or a small used bass boat. That's not what I thought kayak fishing was. And it may be a barrier to entry to anyone thinking about getting into this or getting off the bank and trying to have a budget entry level way of getting into fishing off the bank. Now, can you still do that? Yes. But when you're looking up information on how to get in it and you see these wild rigs, it may stop you right there and you may look at a different avenue to get on the water. Now, if you're not a tournament angler, this next point won't matter, but long term, this could harm tournaments. Because if you feel like you can't be competitive without a $20,000 rig, and the entry fees and travel expenses are already expensive, it may cause you to take a step back and not do it. Now, we've consolidated down to really one national tournament organization, which is Bassmaster. Do I think they're going anywhere? Probably not, but you could see a decline in participation because of the overpricing and over-rigging and overwhelming cost of getting into this on that level of tournament fishing. And even here locally where I fish, there's a lot of fellas with easy 10K into their kayaks, still with the same stuff you're gonna see on the national level. And if you're showing up, let's say you come to a weigh-in or you come to one tournament and you've got your Magellan brand kayak from Academy, which is probably just fine, you're gonna feel almost like you shouldn't be there. So it could be a real problem for attendance, not only to national tournaments, but where the sport is really built, which is down on the local level. To show up and see that kind of tech required, perceived requirement to compete, could really end up stunting the growth of the sport in the long run. And one more thing, in the long run, it actually could just rip the name of our sport away. I mean, it's called kayak fishing still, but I mean, you could easily say we're not in kayaks many times. These are just plastic boats that we're calling kayaks. If we keep down this same road, we could lose the true name, the true meaning, the true history of the sport and turn it into some sort of small boat tournament fishing or small boat fishing, which it maybe already is, I don't know, but you're putting that at risk by this push to over-innovate and not keep kayak fishing. So I'd love to know your thoughts. Please leave them in the comments. Have designers gone too far, or are the designs just fine and maybe the rigging has gone too far? I don't know. I'm not even saying it's a bad thing, but it's something we should be aware of and a little bit concerned about on several levels. Appreciate y'all watching. I look forward to reading your comments, and we'll catch you in the next video.